Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is my Coleman CT200U. Well, one of two things is going to happen today. We're either going to have a completely running mini bike or a close to completely running mini bike. It all depends on the mail right now. I'm going to be upgrading from a stock style carburetor to a slide job. All of the internals are the same. Right now we have a max stroke crank. We have the CS cam, 18-pound valve springs, 14cc head, stainless valves, champion rockers, and an ARC flywheel. Oh, stock length billet rod, Honda UT1 flat piston, the usual. The only thing I have to change out is the spring pressure. We're going to go from 18 pounds to 22 pounds. The easiest way to do that is to just remove the head. I have my head off, and I just threw a little fresh oil at the top of my piston and my cylinder wall. It's down low. I'm going to bring it back up, and I'll collect that oil on a paper towel. Then I'll wipe off the top of the piston, send it back down, lube up the cylinder one more time, and do it again. This will be round 2 at this. We'll bring it back up. And then grab the oil, the paper towel, and I'll wipe the top of my piston. Just like that. Now that everything's clean, I'll send it back down again and do a quick inspection. The cylinder looks good. I don't see any gouging or unusual wear along the bottom portion. The gasket surface on the top looks primo. And I don't see anything unusual on the piston. Nothing was making contact here. The gasket itself looks fine. I'll probably keep this one, and I'm going to go ahead and throw a freshie on. I should be able to set these 22 valve springs by hand, but I find no matter what spring pressure you run with these billet retainers, they like to stick when you're trying to remove them. It's a lot easier to use a spring compressor to get the little split keeps to initially release. That way you can get the billet retainer off and replace the spring. The key to setting valve springs up to, I'd say, 26 pounds with the old thumb bucklers, well, get down low. I'm on my knees right now. I have my head on the workbench. I place a paper towel directly under the valve I'm working on and a rag under that. That way, when you're pushing down, it keeps the valve stem up. That way you don't have to go as far down. It just makes it a whole lot easier, because then all you have to do is push and concentrate on your little split keeps. Now I'm going to hit the whole thing with some carbon choke cleaner. Spark plug and all. Right down the ports. Like this. Up top. Yeah. Let that simmer. And then I'll rinse it off. After it's rinsed off, I go over it with my shop vac to remove all the excess water. I'm looking over this nice clean head, making sure everything's kosher. Our head gasket surface is clean. There's no gouges, deep scratches, or imperfections that are going to cause us any issues. I think this is ready to go. Wipe it off on my belly once for good luck. And right down on the stud she goes. Line it up. Make sure it sits flush. And now I'm going to be placing these Mondo head nuts on and torquing them at 20 foot-pounds. I'm torqued down. I drop my push rods in, and now I'm going to add my lash caps. There's one for the exhaust side, and I have another on the intake. The Champion rockers go on. These nuts are just hand tight, and both of my adjusters are going to be backed off. Now I'll torque these nuts at 94 inch-pounds. I removed the spark plug, found top dead center, and then lashed out at 0.0015. Hug the exhaust and just kiss the intake. I reinstalled my spark plug and I brought my boot and wire into the situation. I just cleaned out my valve cover and I'm setting it up with two barbs. The one on the left is going to the PCV valve. This one on the right is going to cut back to one of these threaded holes on top of the side cover. We're going to have to put a barb there. We're going to put one that just goes straight up. I'm going to use a fresh cork gasket, 4 bolts. I'll get this on, and then I can clock the barb to make the angle. That way we're not interfering with the spark plug or the wire. As I reassemble this engine, I'm using a little bit of that blue thread locker gel to hold my bolts in place. Not all of them, but probably the ones on all of my sheet metal, my valve cover, and maybe the carburetor when we get to that. I have a straight barb coming out of my side cover, and I just turn this one back a little bit so that we're aimed straight for it. I just connected the two barbs with a Tygon hose, and then added a couple clamps. Nice and neat. I just removed the barb that's going to the PCV valve, and I put a little piece of vinyl hose on my oiler. That way I can reach it down inside and lube up my rockers. I forgot to before. Beautiful. Looks like we're installing the carburetor next, because as usual, my package was right on time. I ordered this, I think Thursday afternoon, and it showed up Saturday morning. I have the Tygon fuel line and a cable to go with it. I'm going to be using a Wildcat WC22. It's a 26 millimeter round slide. Brand new, fresh out of the box. I didn't open up the bowl or change anything. I'm just checking the factory settings. I'm 1.5 turns out on the air fuel mix, and the needle on the slide is all the way down, I believe. Just that way I know for a baseline tune, just in case it doesn't start up right away. It looks like I got the fuel pump version of this manifold with this kit, because I don't have a plug. It's not solid, it's definitely threaded. And all I have is that inlet style barb. That might be a pulse fitting. I don't do a lot with fuel pumps, so I'm not familiar. What I do know is that that threads into this. I went down to the hardware store and I got one of these little red vacuum caps. This fits really tight on that fitting. So I'll thread that in. I'll stick that on. I'm going to use 2 gaskets. I like to put a paper one up against the actual intake port, and then in between the paper one and the manifold I put that more fibrous one that comes with the kit. I got some nylock nuts at the hardware store too, but those are for the studs that hold the carb on. All we need right now are these 2 bolts that come with this intake manifold. It's machined specifically for those, so it's kind of hard to screw this up. It doesn't go in the holes with the threads. Sorry about the background noise. I've gone from a heater to an open window to a fan already. I'm putting a little bit of this blue thread locker gel on the ends of these threads. I have my gaskets on there. I should be able to line everything up like the double shish kebab and thread it on home. Yeah, buddy. I'm not going to be able to get the nylock nut threaded on once the carburetor is in place. It's easier to do this while it's off. I just started to thread one of the nuts onto the end of the stud. It's the end that the wrench goes in. I can hold that with a 10 millimeter wrench and then turn the stud to the left, and it'll come back through. And then it'll leave threads exposed on this side that we'll use to attach it to the manifold. That's what those threaded portions are for. Beautiful, huh? Okay. On this side, you're in the wide open. I might use a stud and another one of those nylock nuts, or I might even use a flange bolt with a lock washer. I think that's how I did it before. Yep. We'll find out. I'm not really sure why I used the bolt and washer on one side and the stud with the nylock nut on the other, but I am pretty certain I'll be reminded here in the near future. It may have been as simple as I didn't have enough of the nylock nuts when I did the installation. I don't know, this went pretty easy. I'm pretty much snugged up on the bolt. That's an 8mm, and over on this side the nylock nut is a 10mm. Real convenient, I know. That's why I'm saying we might go back to 2 of these. Get a couple threads coming through. It's not going to back off. I can now tighten the nut, and that'll pull the threads with it. It's not all the way, it's pretty close. I'll take that one in a little bit. I'll tighten this one all the way, and then that one at the end. I'm leaving my slide and my spring to the side. I'm going to take my cap and twist it on so that nothing can fall down in our nice new carburetor. This is easier to do with the choke up. It has to do with lining up the threads. These 4 bolts with a little bit of our thread locker again are going to get the engine off of the workbench and onto the mini bike. All 4 of my bolts are in, but they're not tight. I'm going to spin this thing around and install the torque converter plate and the chain. Once it's aligned, then I'll come back and tighten the engine down. All 4 of my mounting bolts got the blue. The chain is on and the tension is set. Come back here and we'll look up towards the pulley. Our chain looks straight as anything. I'm now going to tighten down the engine. Now if the engine's tight, I'll double check my tension. I think we'll be okay there. Moving on to the fuel line. The bung is coming out of the hole. I'm going to hook my hose up right there, probably put a clamp on it, and then I'll run it down to a filter and a shutoff. This little Tecumseh tank that I got came with all of this stuff and a heavy duty line. I'm going to switch over to Tygon before I hit the carburetor, but there's actually some value in that. That's about as direct as that gets. I don't foresee any issues with flow in the near future. Next, I'm going to hook up the throttle cable. I'm going to try to go directly from the Hornet release to the carburetor without a linkage this time. Swish! Nice loop and everything. I ran my cable up under those big old zip ties on the gas tank. I have a little bit of play. and a full snapper. I put my number plate on the front. I have to cut my zip ties back. This thing isn't moving anywhere. To make it look nice and neat, I drilled a hole straight through it, and I'm going to run all of my cables up to my controls that way. Now I have a kill switch, a starter, an air filter, and my PCV hooked up. I'm going to spin the mini bike around and install the header. Since we ramped up the intake at the carburetor, we're going to go ahead and open up the exhaust to match it. This is a very simple left side exit header. I already smacked it around with some high heat grill paint. I have my bucket of water and my header wrap ready to go. Well now, does not look awfully familiar. This header is dumping out in the same spot as the last one. There's a simple explanation for that. It's the same exact header. I just cut this one short, and then I welded a brace and a Mini 91 silencer to it. So now we have our race pipe and our trail pipe for this mini bike. It's been said that there is a first time for everything. And I am going to have to completely agree with that statement, because I have never used one of these before. This is a GX200 header brace. I just don't think it's a brace for this actual header. It's got one hole in it. We have to attach it to something. I'm guessing a bolt goes through that hole. The only place I'm going to have anything available is right down here. If I try to line this up, I don't think it goes that way. Let's try that. Okay. It at least ends up in the general direction. It's a little shy though. I'm going to put this in the vise and bend it a little bit further and see if I can bring that out right underneath the header. Oh yeah, that wasn't that hard. Stick it back over the hole. I'd say we're touching on the lower side. I guess we're not underneath it, but we're at least next to it. I'm going to get a bolt, maybe a lock washer, some blue Loctite, and a ring clamp. That should pretty much do it. Well, don't I feel like a fool? I can't believe I never did it this way before. I wasted a lot of time trying to figure this out myself, and apparently somebody else already did. Believe it or not, that happens a lot. I'm going to trim the tail on this clamp. I'll just give it the nip tuck, just like I did on these other two. I just cut them short and then fold it under with a pair of needle nose pliers. I put a little gas in the tank. Let's open it up and let it fill the carburetor. Hopefully it doesn't leak. Everything feels okay. Alright. Flip the switches. Pull the choke. It can't take off. Right, and things are vibrating a lot, then the needle valve doesn't seat and it can overflow. When it was idling high, when I first started it, I couldn't even see the screw to get my screwdriver in there and turn it down. Load on it, so it'll be sorry, the header heats up. She got good and hot all right. This header wrap was smoking off so good, I had to move it outside. She's nice and tight now. What's not so tight? Blowing flames at the side of the frame. You notice anything there? It's aimed in a little bit further. Like directly hit the frame now. Well, a hummingbird flew in. I'm not kidding you. Got stupid up there in the rafters, and I had to take apart the vent that I sealed up so that he could get out. I tried persuading him with a broom. I went over backwards. I took the mini bike with me, and my glutamus landed right on the new header. So I squished it in a little bit. I think that's a sign, guys. Let me see if I have something else. This is another one of those things I should have just done in the first place. That's what I get for trying to diversify. I took this muffler, well, header I should say. This thing is everything but a muffler. It's actually got a torque trumpet on the end. This came off of my CT200U project, because it's really not a CT100U header. It's a CT200U-EX header. Completely bolt-on, convertible. I can swap with that RLV clamp between my Mini 91, the old torque trumpet, and a straight pipe. Straight pipe would be for your racing scenario. That way this couldn't vibrate loose and you wouldn't lose it. You wouldn't want to do that, believe me. What would really be nice is if that brace clamps on here too. That might be asking for too much though. There's only one way to find out. It looks like this would have been a sure thing if somebody didn't bend it. I'm going to send it back to its original position in the vise, and then clamp it up. Use a little Loctite, just like I did last time. She's a real crowd pleaser. Woo-hoo-hoo! Get you so! Yeah, buddy! I removed my pull starter, and I got a 19mm socket on my flywheel nut so they could torque my Comet driver to 20 foot-pounds. I have the aluminum weights with pink garter springs still, so we have the 2800 engagement with a yellow spring pulley, 9/2 sprocket, and a 60 out back. Like I said, we're going to go a completely different direction. You can only push these bikes so far. springs are still really, really weird. There's also a lot of vibration in these handlebars. You add that with the bumps, it's kind of a bit much. Spin it around here.
spins around quick. Oof. Come on, baby. You guys can still see? Hot and heavy. Get that fixed it. On the hands, but might be worth it.
I bombed her around a few more times last night before I put her up. And let me tell you, this mini bike is not for the faint of heart. If you have experience riding with a modified engine, your chances are better than someone who hasn't. A beginner, no way, man. You're probably going to get hurt. Even though the brakes work really well, and there is a lot of control to the Hornet release. It gets where it wants to go quick, and it doesn't necessarily go the direction you want it to. You have to know how to steer, counter steer, lean. It has an absolutely great seat height for kicking out the rear. So if you're coming around a corner and you want to get hot on it, you can get the rear end out, which is awesome. But this front, it comes up short and it has a tendency to stick, where I'm hitting my tank, we'll call it a tank mount, instead of the old nubby that was up under here. Now we can't even see it anymore. I probably took a 1/4 inch out of the steering, but I wouldn't want to go any further. If you oversteer the front end and you come in short to a corner, it has a tendency to bite down, and that'll swing the bike. If you're trying to bring the rear around, it's going to want to high side you off this way, and that's basically worst case scenario. On a low side, you can get away from the bike. I'm running it real soft on the air. The vibration and the shock from the bumps, you get used to it, all right? This is probably helping a lot running the low pressure. I'm running higher pressure in the rear. That way I can spin the tire more. If we bring it up too high on pressure, we could start to push the front. You don't want to slide it either. You don't want to dig it and you don't want to slide it. I got a pair of brand new tires right here. Okay, these are a lot like some Sun Fs that I've ran in the past. They have a little bit better grip on the edge of the tread. So when you're leaning the bike, you have a little more assurance. Where it's already sticking, I don't know if that's going to get better or worse. To improve the front end, we could step the axle out. The only problem with that is that we would have to, in all likeliness, cut this off and then somehow make a hanger on a piece of a pipe that has another piece that goes sleeves up into this one or something. The only other thing is if you cut it off here and you put your tab here, right, and move your axle forward, but when you do that, you're going to lower the front of the bike, I don't know, I'd say 1.5 inches anyway. I like the way it sits nice and level. So, to match the rear to the front, you're in for some work. If we were just moving the axle tabs up to like up here, you know, it wouldn't be terrible if we were just dealing with the tabs. But we also have the drum brake. All right, and you have all that action. So this tab has to go too. Now, if I tried to mount it above the frame, I'm going to get myself in a situation with my braces here. I've seen it where guys lower it and they put it up here. How do you adjust the axle if you're in a fixed position? you would be limited, I would believe, to moving the engine back and forth to add tension to the chain. That works, but with some bikes, when you get the torque and stuff up there, man, it doesn't matter what you do, and they're going to want to pull to the back of the slots and keep loosening the chain. That's why I like to put my engines on, pull to the back of the slot, and then make my adjustment at the axle if at all possible. You see, this stuff adds up and it gets frustrating quick. I have Plan B sitting right here. Coleman CT200U EX. Basically a bare frame, and it's got that suspension. This is tempting, guys. Real tempting. All of these parts fit on that mini bike. Grrr. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe we should just start slinging cyborg meat and laying out some gussets for this thing and just see where it goes, huh? I kind of like that idea. I'll think it over. The CT200U looks absolutely amazing as it sits. All the lines are there. It's just that fork angle. If we attempted the fork swap between these two bikes, I'll show you what you run into. If we hook on just below the axle on the bottom of the tube and we measure up, all right, we're about 25 inches at the top of the upper clamp. If we hook on here, again, we're just below the axle. We're simulating the tube. 25 inches is way up there. The top clamp, for lack of better words, is closer to 21. So to level the bike to make it look right, we'd be giving up 3 or 4 inches here to go through the top clamp to bring the front end down. That frame design is completely different than this one. The tubes for the Coleman kit must be about 20, 21, 22, somewhere in there. Probably closer to 22. Yeah. It would be really, really ugly if I put that fork on this mini bike. So I don't want to ruin it like that. That would be just doing it dirty. Well, you know, in a bad way. There's dirty in a good way, too. She likes to play now. What would you do if you were in this position? Let me know in the comments. In the meantime, I'm just going to keep taking this thing apart until it starts to look like something special. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.
I want you to stay.